I immediately realized the house was decrepit. On the outside, it looked like all the old Khrushchevkas. Chipped paint on the facade, balconies with crooked frames, antennas, and satellite dishes sticking out everywhere, like rusty tentacles. By the entrance, a thin cat with matted fur sat, lifted its head, looked at me with empty indifference, and closed its eyes again. The realtor habitually pushed the heavy entrance door with her elbow so as not to dirty her hands, and went inside. I followed her. The smell in the stairwell was thick, multi-layered. The smell of old paint, dampness, cat urine mixed with something sweetly rotten. On the walls, shoe scuffs, some scribbles, an ad for a plumber, cheap, with a torn-off number. I automatically raised my head. The lamp under the ceiling flickered, casting a weak yellow light, as if it hadn't quite decided whether to burn or not. The elevator, of course, didn't work. The shaft was sealed, crosswise, with adhesive tape. "You'll have to get used to the stairs," the realtor cheerfully remarked, quickly running up. I followed, listening to the creak of the old railings. On the second floor, the paint had peeled, so much that the concrete looked like old, scaly skin. Somewhere upstairs, a door slammed, and unhurried steps were heard. The realtor stopped and turned to me. "Here's your apartment." I glanced at the door. It was an ordinary door covered with leatherette. The keyhole was chipped, as if a key constantly failed to find its way in. The area is good. Transport is nearby. The neighbors are quiet, the realtor said, and opened the door. Inside, everything met my expectations. Sad floral wallpaper, wooden floors, Soviet-era furniture. Utilities are included in the price. The owners are willing to buy appliances, like a kettle or even a microwave. I'll arrange it with them. The realtor prattled on, but I wasn't listening to her anymore. The apartment, of course, was dilapidated. I understood that, but I still decided to agree. The price was just too good, and after having to move out of the last apartment in a hurry, I was now clinging to any option, just so I wouldn't have to spend the night on my friends' couches. I would have been fine with even a room in a communal apartment, but this option at least gave the illusion of a separate dwelling. I sighed for the last time, glanced at the chipped walls, and signed the contract. 2 days later, I brought my things. There weren't many. A suitcase with clothes, a box with dishes, a backpack with documents, and a laptop. The first thing I did was check the outlets. In half of them, there was no electricity. Then I turned on the water. A rusty stream came out at first, but then it cleared up. The gas stove looked like it could explode at any moment, but it worked. I sighed and thought that everything wasn't so bad. The main thing was not to get stuck in this place for long. The evening in the apartment turned out to be surprisingly quiet. I unpacked the boxes, hastily arranged my things. I didn't have a TV, and no internet either. A technician was supposed to come and connect it only the next day. There wasn't much to do, so I decided to go for a smoke. I involuntarily shivered when I stepped out into the cool evening air. The balcony was open. To the right, it was abutted by a wall, and to the left, it adjoined the neighbor, S. There was a flimsy partition between us, quite high but not complete. Eli solid. I leaned on the rusty railing and looked down. A couple of street lights were on in the courtyard. Their light barely pierced through the crooked branches of the old trees. Somewhere in the distance, a cat was meowing. I was about to go back into the room when I heard movement. To the left. I turned. My neighbor, a man in his 40s, tall and thin, was smoking, leaning against the wall and silently looking down. Strangely, I hadn't even noticed him come out. "Hello," I said. He nodded, took a drag, slowly exhaled the smoke. "So, you're the new neighbor?" "I guess so," I replied. "Oleg." "Anton." We stood in silence. The conversation didn't flow, but that didn't bother me. Unfamiliar people rarely hit it off right away. It continued like this for several days. Every evening, Oleg would come out to smoke around the same time as me. When I went out onto the balcony, I knew for sure that he would be standing there in his usual pose, leaning against the wall and looking down. We would exchange short phrases, mostly about the weather, sometimes about the building, but nothing personal. I noticed that he avoided talking about himself. He would just shrug his shoulders or dismiss it with a, "Yeah, well, that's just how it is." The other residents of the building were also strange. When I met someone in the morning on the stairs or by the entrance, I would habitually say hello, but in response, I only heard an incomprehensible mumble. No one stopped to start a conversation, just lowered eyes and a quick pace. One day, when we were standing on the balcony, he chuckled, tossed the cigarette butt down. "It's just the place, you know." "What do you mean?" "Just that life isn't sweet for people here. That's all. Don't worry, they're normal." His words didn't particularly comfort me for some reason. That night, I woke up to a light tapping on the window. My eyes were closed. I looked at the phone. 3:12. My sleepy brain didn't immediately understand what had woken me up. Maybe I imagined it. The tapping repeated, more insistently now. I froze, listening. The sound was strange. It didn't sound like a fist tapping. Rather, it was as if something was swinging in the wind and gently hitting the glass. I threw off the blanket and sat up on the bed. The room was dark. Only a faint light from the streetlight came in from the street. The balcony door looked normal. Nothing could be seen through the curtains. I got up, slowly approached, tapped again, but I still, carefully, looked out. Nothing. The balcony was empty. There was nothing that could be tapping the glass so strangely. I stood there, listening to the silence outside the window. I remembered how the realtor had told me about drafts. "It's normal," she had said when the door in the stairwell slammed in my presence. The building is old. The wind blows through. Logical, but for some reason I still felt uncomfortable. In the morning, it all seemed silly. Oh well, it was just the wind. I even laughed at myself, while brushing my teeth in front of the mirror. In the evening, as usual, I went out onto the balcony. Oleg was already standing on his side, leaning against the wall, smoking. "Hey, was that you on the balcony last night?" I asked cautiously. Something was tapping on the window. Oleg slowly took a drag, exhaled the smoke. "A draft," he said. The next night, I was woken up by a tapping again. First, it was faint, cautious, as if someone was hesitantly touching the glass. Then, it got stronger, more insistent, with a strange rhythm, as if something heavy and shapeless was hitting the balcony door with a swing. I lay there, listening as the muffled thuds echoed through the dark room. And then I heard a whisper. It was a raspy, hoarse whisper, like an old man with a sore throat, a low, drawn-out sound, as if a voice from the other side was saying, "Let me in." I sat up on the bed, clutching the blanket in my fingers. The room was empty, but the air in it seemed to have thickened, become sticky and heavy, a lump in my throat. The balcony door was locked. I remembered that for sure Dot outside, comma. There were barely discernible shadows swaying. I must have imagined it, I thought. Sleepy delirium. Maybe someone is smoking outside at night, hulking. Or the neighbors have the TV on, and I'm just overworked. So I'm seeing things. I got up, walked to the balcony, slowly and silently pushed the curtain aside. The darkness behind the glass seemed dense and viscous, as if you could touch it. No one was there, just the branches of the trees, lazily casting shadows on the floor that looked like thin, crooked fingers. I didn't like that sound. I didn't like how it woke me up. I didn't like that I remembered it. With an effort of will, I forced myself to lie back down, but I only managed to fall asleep in the morning. In the evening of the next day, when I, as usual, went out to smoke on the balcony, the pigeons would gather in flocks, arguing, sharing crumbs. I looked at them and didn't immediately understand what was bothering me. They only sat on my side of the balcony. Not a single bird even approached the balcony partition and Oleg's side, as if there was an invisible barrier there. But the neighbor himself was on his side. He, as usual, was smoking and exhaling the smoke into the thickening twilight. He turned his head slightly. "Yeah, it's lonely, you know," he said, just like always. His voice was normal, but there was a kind of detached indifference in it, not sadness or a complaint, just a fact stated without emotion. I was surprised. He had never been so frank with me. I wanted to support him. "I understand. If you want, come over. I'd be happy to have you. I'm in apartment 32, although you already know that." I smiled and decided to make a joke, nodding at the partition. "It's easy to get over the balcony, too. The partition is flimsy." Oleg looked at me. The corners of his lips twitched into a grim smile. "Yeah, it's flimsy." I suddenly felt that the air had changed, as if it had gotten sharply colder. To lighten the mood a little, I asked, "How long have you lived here?" My neighbor was silent, then threw the cigarette butt over the railing and said, 10 years now. Alone, as you can see. Before, no one talked to me so casually." He said it in a strange way, as if he wasn't just living here, but was stuck, as if time had stopped for him. Oleg Ekstan ended his hand to me over the partition and, for the first time in all the time we'd known each other, smiled. The smile looked as if his lips had long since grown unaccustomed to such a position. I shook his hand. It was ice, cold. I quickly finished my cigarette, stubbed it out in a can, nodded to Oleg, and went back into my apartment, trying not to look back. That night, I was woken up by a tapping on the glass, a heavy sound as if someone was hitting the outside, demanding to be let in. Against the curtains, a human figure. It was hanging and hitting against the balcony door. Its head was down, its hands dangling. Another hit, another tap. The sound got louder. The whole apartment was shaking. The human body was frantically hitting the glass, thrashing like a bird in a cage. I gathered the rest of my strength, jerked sharply, with difficulty unclenched my fingers, and pulled the curtain. Oleg, his face, was pressed against it, bloated. His lips were spread wide. His eyes were empty, but they were looking straight at me. I screamed and abruptly sat up, breathing heavily. It was a dream, just a dream. The room was in semi-darkness. Everything around me was as it always was. The same table, chair, laptop on it. I looked at the clock. It was only 8 p.m. I had dozed off for a couple of hours. I pinched my arm, ran my palms over my face, and felt that my throat was terribly dry. I got up, poured some water, and took a few sips. Damn, what a dream. But inside, I felt much better. The dream had been too real. I was terribly glad that it all turned out to be unreal. I sat down at the laptop, mechanically ran my fingers over the keys. The thoughts didn't go away. Oleg, his ice-cold hand, the strange look, the conversation that sent a chill down my spine, and those taps outside the window, my dream. I decided to Google our building, just a random search. I also typed in the name Oleg, hit search, and inside, everything immediately turned cold. It couldn't be true. I leaned closer to the screen. My heart was pounding madly. The headline of the article seemed unreal, like some evil prank. Resident of a building on Leninskaya, 12 committed suicide. Body found on the balcony 10 years ago. His name was Oleg Ilyin. I clenched my fists, my eyes frantically scanning the lines. The article said that his body was found in the morning, swinging on a rope like a pendulum. Someone from the neighbors heard a tapping from his balcony at night, but they didn't look out. Later, they said that he supposedly had a change of heart and tried to signal for help, but he didn't make it. Below was a photograph of the deceased. On the screen was him, my neighbor, the very same Oleg with whom I smoked on the balcony every day, the one who shook my hand a few hours ago and whose ice-cold palm I could still feel on my comma fingers. No. I recoiled from the laptop, stood up abruptly, a pulsing pain in my chest, a ringing in my temples. No, this is a mistake. This is a dream, another stupid nightmare. I had to make sure. I rushed to the balcony, threw open the door. The evening coolness hit my face. I stepped forward, looked around. It was empty. Just the black glass of the neighbor's balcony across from me. But then I noticed something. A rope, a broken end of a thick clothesline, hung forlornly, as if someone had just been freed from it. I stepped back, my back hitting the wall. This is impossible. It's nonsense. I ran out of the apartment barefoot in just a t-shirt. I ran to the door across from me and knocked sharply, loudly, demanding. A groan was heard behind the door, but the lock clicked and the door opened a little. The tired, murky eyes of an elderly man stared at me. What do you want? Oleg, who lives across from me. Do you know him? The man didn't answer. In the hallway behind him, someone coughed. I heard a whisper, a low, anxious whisper. And then the door slowly opened wider, and in the darkness, the silhouette of an old woman in a faded robe appeared. She looked up, looked at me, and then suddenly lowered her gaze to the floor, as if she was afraid, as if she didn't want to speak. But she said, "He died 10 years ago." I slowly shook my head. "No, it's impossible. I spoke with him." The old woman sighed and shook her head. "Everyone spoke with him." My throat went dry. "What? What are you talking about? He knocked on everyone's door?" The old woman looked up at me, her eyes dull, as if faded with age. "He wants to come back. He doesn't like it there, so he's asking to come back to us, the living." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean, asking?" The old woman looked at me directly, for a long time. Then she tilted her head a little, just like the figure behind the glass did, and whispered, "He wants to take someone with him, so he won't be bored." The world swayed. The air was stuck in my lungs. I stepped back, shaking my head. "No, no, no. Just don't let him in," she added quietly. And don't invite him. For God's sake, don't. As long as you don't let him in, as long as you don't invite him inside, he won't come in and can't do anything." I looked at her, and she looked at me. There was no fear in her eyes, just weariness. The door slammed shut. I was left alone in the silence of the stairwell. A drop of sweat rolled down my temple, a ringing in my head. Just don't let him in. The old woman's voice was dry, firm, indifferent, as if she was talking about something inevitable. I ran my palm over my face, trying to shake off the feeling that someone was standing behind my back. I turned, but the landing was empty. Only the dim light of the light bulb was in the dirty walls. "If you want, come over." My own words, said to Oleg. And why did I say that? I'd trapped myself in a cage. In my chest, a throbbing pain. My heart had fallen out of its usual rhythm and plunged somewhere deep down. To hell with it. I yanked my door open, rushed inside. The room was dark and quiet. Only the curtains on the balcony fluttered, as if someone had passed through them. I rushed to the closet, yanked my backpack, and started stuffing things into it, grabbing the first things that came to hand. Jeans, a charger, my wallet, my phone. I didn't care if I forgot something important. I just had to leave. And then there was a knock. I froze. .1, 2, 3. It was as if something heavy was hitting the balcony door. I took a step, then another. The knocking stopped, but the air seemed to have thickened, pressing on my shoulders. "Don't breathe. Don't look. Just turn around and leave." But I still looked. On the balcony was a silhouette, tall, motionless. Its head was tilted at a strange angle, as if its neck was broken. Its hands hung down, too, thin, too long, just like in my dream. An icy lump formed in my stomach. My legs felt like cotton. On the glass, there was a faint mark, as if someone had run a hand over it. I slowly backed away, but it was hard to walk, like in a nightmare when you're running, but the ground is sticking to your feet. The silhouette moved. The air in the room became thick. It smelled of dampness, earth, some ething, suffocating. I couldn't tear my eyes away. The balcony door slowly opened. I had invited him in myself. The stupor lasted for a few seconds, though it felt like an eternity. I lunged for the front door and started frantically shaking the handle. It was locked. I senselessly twisted the locks, cursing this apartment, this building, and my own politeness for that meaningless come over that had slipped out mechanically, just to have something to say. The door wouldn't open. The locks wouldn't give. I yanked at them again and again, but they only screeched in response, as if mocking me. The skin on my palms was sweaty. My fingers were shaking. I hit the door with my shoulder, trying to knock it down, but it didn't even budge. Behind me, a creak sounded, a low, with a wet undertone, as if something had gotten wet and was starting to stretch. I slowly turned around. Oleg was standing, or rather, hanging, by the balcony door. A rope was deeply embedded in the skin of his neck, darker from the pressure. He was moving towards me slowly, like a doll with loose joints, as if his legs weren't obeying him completely. His head was tilted at an impossible angle, his eyes wide open, but no pupils were visible, just a whitish emptiness. No one let me in. No one helped. His voice was quiet, with a rasp, as if a torn throat could barely push out the words. "You said come over, so here I am." I backed away, but something grabbed me. Ice-cold fingers squeezed my wrists, digging into my skin, piercing it with a chill. I tried to jerk free, but the grip only tightened, tightening. It became impossible to breathe. I was being pulled forward, to where Oleg was standing. His head tilted slightly. He was smiling with a terrible grin, the grin of a man who had hanged himself. "Come with me," he whispered. The world blurred. Colors became faded like a smeared watercolor. The apartment disappeared. The walls receded into the depths. The shadows dissolved, scattering into emptiness. I no longer felt the floor beneath my feet, and yet I took a step, then another. The cold enveloped me, hitting my face. I was standing on the balcony. The railing beneath my palms was slippery, covered with something wet. Below, a thick darkness was rising, as if it was breathing. The air was ringing with tension, with fear. Oleg was standing next to me. His shadow seemed to be longer than it should be. His eyes were bottomless and empty. "Your turn," he whispered, and the voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. His mouth slid into an impossible smile, revealing a void. Something in my chest snapped. I tried to resist. I really tried, but I was obviously weaker. I was inexorably being pulled in, and I stepped into the void.